There are nights that start like any other and end up carving themselves into a person's memory with a blade so cold, they remember the sound of the cut. This ordinary, unremarkable Friday was one of those nights, and the room didn't go quiet because a black woman walked in. It went quiet because of what people assumed the moment she did. Her name was Camille Jordan, and when the door of Dale River Bistro's swung shut behind her, she felt it. The shift, the quick sweep of eyes pretending not to stare, the subtle tightening of shoulders. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't shouting or insults or anything anyone could point to and say, there's racism. It was smaller than that. It was the kind of racial bias that didn't erupt. It bled. Slowly, invisibly, until you wondered if you were imagining the wound. Camille stood still for a moment, letting the warmth of the restaurant's amber lights brush over her coat. She looked like anyone else, soft scarf around her neck, navy pea coat, hair pulled into a neat low twist. Nothing about her screamed trouble, or danger, or disruption. Yet the hostess looked at her like an unexpected complication. Hi, the young woman said, clinging to the edge of the podium as if steadying herself. Can I help you? Table for one, Camille replied with a calm smile. The hostess blinked. A strange, evaluating glance flickered across her face, one Camille had learned to recognize over a lifetime of being the only black woman in the room. It was the look that searches for a reason to say no. Do you have a reservation? The hostess asked. Camille looked past her. Half the dining room sat empty. No reservation, she said. Just dinner. The hostess hesitated, then gave a brittle, over-practiced smile. Well, we're actually pretty busy tonight. Camille nodded. She didn't challenge it. Instead, she simply said, I don't mind waiting. After a clipped, reluctant, follow me, the hostess led her through the restaurant with the slow, careful pace of someone escorting a problem. Instead of seating her in the warm center of the room, where laughter bubbled between clinking glasses, she placed Camille in a dim corner, tucked behind a half-wall like an afterthought. A hiding place. A quiet seat, the kind reserved for people restaurants hope other customers won't notice. Camille sat, folding her hands in her lap, breathing evenly. She had come here tonight with intention, with purpose. Because over 20 complaints had crossed her desk in the last few weeks, black residents saying they were treated differently in local shops and restaurants. Dismissed, ignored, overcharged. Not enough for a headline, but deeply enough to bruise. So she decided to see it herself. Not as District Attorney Camille Jordan. Not as the woman whose signature made police chiefs sit straighter. Not as the official overseeing the county's newest racial bias investigation. Just as a black woman trying to eat dinner. 10 minutes passed. Then 15, 20. A waitress floated past her table twice, carrying drinks to a couple who'd walked in 5 minutes after Camille. The waitress avoided eye contact so deliberately it felt rehearsed. Another server glanced her way, then glanced toward the manager as if silently asking for permission to approach the table. Camille exhaled slowly. She waited. And the longer she waited, the heavier the humiliation sat on her shoulders. Quiet, familiar, uninvited. A family nearby whispered, glancing over. A teenager snickered. An older white man 2 tables away watched her with an expression Camille wished she didn't understand. Finally, a waitress approached, reluctantly. I'm not sure we're still serving, she murmured, clutching her notepad like a shield. Camille checked her watch. It's 7:40, she said gently. Yeah, but we're short-staffed. Then the waitress disappeared again. Camille stared down at the unwanted table, at the empty space where a menu, a glass, a simple acknowledgement should have been. Before she could collect her thoughts, a shadow fell across her table. The manager. He didn't smile, didn't greet her, didn't bother with the courtesy he gave the couple he'd just spoken to near the bar. Ma'am, he said tightly, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Camille blinked. Is there a reason? We've had complaints, he said quickly, as if reciting a line he'd practiced. Customers are saying you're causing a disturbance. A disturbance? She repeated. She hadn't moved nor spoken loudly. She hadn't even been served. Yes, he snapped. And since you're refusing to leave peacefully, I will be calling the police. The words sank like a stone in her stomach. There was the threat used to control, the fear used to silence, the escalation no one else in the restaurant would ever face for merely existing quietly in a corner booth. Camille didn't raise her voice. "Do what you feel is necessary," she said softly. Minutes later, 2 officers entered, hands instinctively near their belts, eyes scanning the room for the disturbance they'd been told about. The manager pointed at Camille. That's her." The officers approached. "Ma'am, we got a call about an issue here," one officer said. "I understand," Camille replied, steady. The officer motioned for her to stand. "We need you to come with us." He reached for her arm, not painfully, but with the assumption that she wouldn't comply unless guided. Gasps rippled across the dining room. A few people stared. Some looked away. And an older black woman near the window pressed a trembling hand to her chest. Camille stood, allowing the officers to hold her arms, letting the humiliation wash over her like cold rain. Not because she accepted it, but because she knew what would come next. "Ma'am," the second officer said, "do you have an ID?" "It's in my coat pocket," Camille answered quietly. "You can take it out." The officer hesitated, then reached into the pocket. He pulled out her leather ID holder, opened it, and stopped breathing. His eyes widened, because staring back at him wasn't the face of a suspect or a trespasser. It was the badge of the district attorney of Crystal Ridge County. He let go of her arm. Immediately. "Ma'am," he stammered. "We didn't realize." Camille adjusted her coat, lifting her chin slightly. "You didn't ask," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of 100 unspoken truths. A wave of silence swept the room. The kind of silence that isn't peaceful, the kind that exposes everyone who contributed to it. But the night was far from finished. Because before Camille could address the manager, before anyone could apologize or explain or scramble to undo the damage, a chair scraped loudly behind her. Someone stood up. Someone who had witnessed everything. Someone whose words would ignite the next firestorm. For a moment, the air inside Dale River Bistro felt suspended, as if every person in the room had collectively forgotten how to breathe. Camille stood still, her district attorney badge glinting faintly beneath the restaurant's soft amber lights. The officers beside her looked stunned, the manager visibly shrinking into himself. But the silence wasn't what cut deepest. What cut deepest was that no one, not one person, had spoken up until after her title had been revealed. And then, finally, someone did. A chair scraped sharply against the floor behind her. Every head turned. It was the elderly black woman from the front window, the one who had watched the scene unfold with a trembling hand pressed against her chest. She stood slowly, leaning lightly on her cane, her back straight despite the pain Camille could see woven through her steps. Her gray curls framed her face like a soft halo, but her eyes, those were fire. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice clear and steady despite her age. "I have something to say." A ripple of unease passed through the room. The officers stepped back. The manager stiffened. The waitstaff froze mid-motion. And Camille turned toward her fully, giving the woman her attention, not as the district attorney, but as another black woman recognizing a familiar ache. "My name is Evelyn Price," the older woman announced, addressing the room with a dignity that demanded respect. "And I watched this entire thing. Every second. Every insult disguised as hospitality. Every lie." The manager swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I don't think." Evelyn raised a hand. The manager fell silent. "No. You don't get to speak right now," she said with a calm firmness that shook him more than if she'd yelled. "Not after what you allowed here." The restaurant went silent again, but this time, the silence didn't come from discomfort. It came from the truth finally standing up. Evelyn stepped forward, cane tapping against the wooden floor. "I've been coming to this restaurant for 7 years, she said, her voice carrying across the room. "I come here every Friday for the soup and to see people, because sometimes this is the only place I'm not alone." Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied herself. "And every Friday," she continued, "I watch how people are treated here. Some get smiles. Some get menus. Some get second chances when they're rude or impatient. She paused, eyes glistening. But every time a black person walks in, the temperature in this room drops 10 degrees. A few customers shifted uncomfortably. One man let out a quiet, defensive scoff, but quickly silenced himself when Evelyn turned her gaze toward him. That young woman, Evelyn said, pointing gently toward Camille, sat in that corner doing absolutely nothing but breathing. And for that you called the police. The words hung in the air. Camille felt a knot in her throat, not from anger, but from something older, more tired. The echo of generations forced to witness each other's humiliation. Evelyn continued, voice trembling only slightly. My son was pulled out of his car 20 years ago because an officer said he looked nervous. My grandson was handcuffed at 15 because he fit the description. And tonight, I saw the same fear in her face that I saw in theirs. Her cane tapped the floor again. You didn't know she was the district attorney. But you shouldn't have needed to know that to treat her like a human being. The room was utterly still. The manager opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, one of the younger servers, a Latina woman in her 20s, stepped forward too. Ms. Price is right, she whispered. We're told to keep certain customers in the back. To watch them. Not officially, but you know. She didn't have to finish. Everyone knew. The hostess from earlier looked down, cheeks burning. Camille took in the scene slowly. She hadn't expected backup. She hadn't expected the truth to rise from a room that had been silent only minutes earlier. But injustice, once exposed, has a way of unraveling everything it touches. One of the officers stepped forward, clearing his throat. Ma'am, he said to Camille, we apologize. We can file a report on what happened if you'd like. He offered the words carefully, with a shaky respect that hadn't been there before. Camille's expression didn't soften. Officer, she said quietly, if I had not had that badge, would you have listened to me? The officer hesitated, opened his mouth and closed it, because the truth sat between them, heavy and undeniable. Probably not. Definitely not. Camille didn't press further. She simply nodded once and turned her attention back to the manager. He was sweating now, hands shaking slightly as he attempted a remorseful expression that didn't touch his eyes. I had no idea who you were, he stammered. And that, Camille replied, is the problem. Her voice didn't rise, but her words landed with the weight of a gavel. People shouldn't have to be somebody to deserve dignity. Evelyn nodded firmly, supporting her like a pillar of quiet strength. The manager tried again, desperation bleeding into his voice. Please, I can explain. We've had incidents before, people loitering, causing trouble. I thought. You thought she was trouble because she was black, Evelyn cut in sharply. Just say it plain. Several customers gasped softly. The manager's face reddened. I didn't mean. Meaning requires intention, Camille said. Bias doesn't. The words settled over the room like a heavy blanket, uncomfortable, undeniable. Camille stepped forward, pulling her coat tighter around her. I came tonight because I've received multiple reports about discriminatory treatment in this community, she said. I wanted to see for myself. Maybe the stories were exaggerated. Maybe people misread situations. Maybe things weren't as bad as they sounded. She looked around the room, meeting eyes that suddenly found their menus very interesting. But standing here now, it's worse. A murmur rippled through the restaurant. One man at the bar muttered under his breath, "This is being blown way out of." "Stand up," Evelyn said, turning to him sharply. The man blinked. "What?" "Stand up," she repeated, fire returning to her eyes. "If you're going to dismiss what you just watched with your own eyes, at least have the courage to look her in the face and say it." The man sank back into silence. Camille exhaled slowly, grounding herself, pulling back from anger and stepping into something more precise. "I'm shutting this place down," the manager blurted suddenly, panicked. "I'll close for the night, No, Camille interrupted. "You don't get to hide behind closed doors. Not tonight." She turned to the officers. "I'd like a formal incident report filed," she said. Detail everything you witnessed from the moment you arrived. The officers nodded, regret heavy in their expressions. And, Camille added, notify Chief Ramirez that I'll be requesting a full review of police response protocols in bias-related incidents. The first officer swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. But before anyone else could speak, Evelyn's voice returned, soft this time, but trembling with emotion. Miss Jordan, forgive me for asking, but what happens next? For people like us? Who doesn't have badges or titles? Camille turned to her slowly. And in Evelyn's eyes, she saw decades of quiet wounds. Years of being polite to protect herself. A lifetime of swallowing insults so they didn't choke her. Camille answered gently, but her voice carried steel. What happens next is accountability. She touched Evelyn's hand lightly. And it starts tonight. But before Camille could outline anything further, before she could comfort Evelyn, or address the room, or call the necessary officials, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Then again. Then again. 3 rapid alerts. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her blood ran cold. A breaking news notification. A headline flashing across multiple outlets. And in bold letters. Dale River Bistro incident. Video goes viral. Public outrage erupts. Camille's stomach dropped. Someone had filmed the entire thing. And the world had already seen it. The notification glowing on Camille's phone screen felt like a spark dropped into gasoline. The moment she read the headline, Dale River Bistro incident, video goes viral, public outrage erupts, something inside her shifted. It wasn't fear. It was the undeniable awareness that this moment was no longer contained within 4 walls. The entire country was now inside that restaurant with her. Evelyn saw Camille's expression change. What is it, dear? She asked softly. Camille didn't speak right away. She turned the screen so Evelyn could see. The older woman's eyes widened, then filled with something between shock and sorrow. Oh Lord, Evelyn whispered. It's already out there. Already out there. Already spreading. Already igniting. The officers shifted uneasily. The manager paled. The hostess covered her mouth with both hands. And in the back of the restaurant, a teenager, the same one who had snickered earlier, was now whispering frantically to his friend, Dude, that's them. That's literally happening right now. My mom just sent me the link. Camille inhaled slowly through her nose. She didn't want the attention. She certainly didn't want to become a viral moment in a nationwide conversation that never seemed to stop hurting the same people over and over. All she'd wanted was the truth. And now the truth was trending. Before she could say anything, before she could even process what this meant, the restaurant doors burst open. It wasn't the police. It wasn't press. It wasn't protesters. It was her chief investigator, Marcus Hale, breathing hard as if he had sprinted from his car. Camille, he said, heading straight for her, not bothering to acknowledge the stunned crowd around them. We need to talk. Now. His tone wasn't angry, it was urgent. Too urgent. Marcus, she said, lowering her voice, what's happening? He opened his mouth, but the manager jumped in, flustered. I don't know what's going on, but please understand, we never meant for this to. Marcus held up a hand without looking at him. Sir, with all due respect, not one single person in this room wants to hear from you right now. The manager wilted backward like he'd been slapped. Marcus turned back to Camille. You're trending on every platform, he said, keeping his voice low. Hashtags. News alerts. Commentators are already jumping on it. Reporters are headed here right now. Camille exhaled sharply. So it's that big already? No, Marcus said. It's bigger than big. He stepped closer, lowering his voice even more. And that's not the only problem. Evelyn leaned in slightly, her face tight with concern. What do you mean? Camille asked. Marcus pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A paused video appeared, shaky footage clearly taken from a customer's phone inside the restaurant. In the frame, the officers stood just behind Camille, holding her by the arms. The host staff lingered in the background. The manager's face was partially visible. But it wasn't the visuals that made Camille's stomach twist. It was the sound. The voice, the voice of the teenage boy, muttering something under his breath after the manager threatened to call the police. Marcus hit play. In the video, the boy whispered, "Man, she's not even doing anything. They always do this to black people here." Then his friend whispered back, "Yeah, but if she mouths off or something, that's on her. You can't act like that in public." And then the moment, captured forever. Camille being physically lifted from her seat. The restaurant going silent. Someone muttering, "Here we go again." Marcus paused the clip. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Camille closed her eyes for a moment. Not because the video upset her, she'd lived versions of that moment before. But because she knew exactly how videos like this spread. Stripped of nuance, cut into pieces, weaponized by people who didn't care to understand. "Marcus," Camille said quietly, "tell me the rest." He glanced toward the entrance, as if expecting reporters to burst in. "It's not just the video," he said. "Someone leaked that you were dining undercover to investigate bias complaints." Camille stiffened. Her eyes snapped open. "Leaked it? Who would?" "We don't know yet." Marcus cut her off. "But the leak makes it look like you set the restaurant up, as if this entire thing was orchestrated." "That's a lie," Evelyn said sharply, her cane tapping the ground. She sat there for nearly 30 minutes without service. This was no setup. "I know that," Marcus said. "But perception is reality online. And right now, half the country is praising you for exposing discrimination, and the other half is accusing you of abusing your position." He took a breath. "Threats are already pouring into the DA's office." Camille blinked, stunned into stillness. "Threats? Already? I haven't even left the restaurant," she whispered. "Exactly," Marcus said. "And the county board wants a meeting tonight." The weight of the moment pressed into Camille's chest. Not panic. Not fear but responsibility. She steadied herself. "Evelyn," she said gently, turning to the older woman, "thank you. For speaking up. For your honesty. For your strength." Evelyn shook her head, sadness clouding her face. "I shouldn't have had to," she whispered. "It shouldn't take a badge for the truth to matter." Camille reached out, touching her hand. "Tonight was wrong," she said. "But we're not done. I need you to stay safe. The rest, let me handle." Evelyn nodded, though her eyes were still glossy with emotion. But the moment was cut short by new chaos. Outside, beyond the restaurant windows, voices were rising. A swell of people moving toward the doors. Marcus looked out the window and cursed under his breath. "Reporters?" Camille asked. "No," Marcus said. "Worse." The crowd outside grew louder. A mix of angry voices, camera flashes, chants, protesters holding phones, live streams beginning. People pushed closer to the entrance. It was happening too fast. Police cars began arriving, lights flashing, sirens warbling. "Camille," Marcus said urgently, "we need to leave. Now." She nodded once. But before they could move, the restaurant doors flew open yet again, this time with a force that startled everyone inside. A woman stepped in. Not a protester, but someone Camille recognized instantly, someone whose presence in this moment made no sense. Her political rival, County Councilwoman Rebecca Langford. Her heels clicked sharply against the restaurant floor as she strode inside, her expression cold and calculated, a phone in her hand already recording. "District Attorney Jordan," she said loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear, "we need to talk about what you've just unleashed on this community." Marcus muttered, "Oh, hell." The officers straightened. The manager looked both terrified and relieved. The crowd outside surged louder. And Camille? She turned fully to face the woman approaching her, shoulders straight, voice calm. "Councilwoman Langford," she said. "This is not the time." Langford stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Oh, I think it is exactly the time," she said. "Because whatever you think you were doing here tonight just set this county on fire." Her voice dropped lower, sharp enough to cut. "And I'm going to make sure the flames land squarely on you." The threat hung between them. But Camille didn't flinch. Not yet. Because she knew what Langford didn't. The storm outside wasn't just noise. It was evidence. And evidence always leads somewhere. Even if you're not ready for what you find. The moment Councilwoman Langford squared her shoulders at Camille, the restaurant seemed to shrink around them. Every conversation, every breath, every heartbeat in the room bent toward the tension crackling between the two women. Outside, the crowd surged, voices blending into a storm of anger, support, confusion, and disbelief. The restaurant's front windows trembled under the press of camera flashes and people demanding answers. "Let's go," Marcus whispered to Camille. "Before this becomes a circus." But Camille didn't move. She wasn't running from this moment. Not tonight. Not after everything. She turned fully to face Langford, whose lips curled into a sharp, pleased smile, as if she believed she had already won. "Councilwoman," Camille said evenly, "I understand you're upset. But we will not have this conversation here." "Oh, I think we will," Langford replied, lifting her phone slightly so it captured Camille's face. "You've just created a public safety crisis with your little undercover stunt. And I intend to hold you accountable." Marcus took a step forward, but Camille placed a gentle hand on his arm. "No," she said softly. "Let her speak." Langford seized the opening. "You've divided this county," she continued. "Businesses are panicking. People are angry. Protests are forming outside your office as we speak. And now," she waved her phone toward the window, "now you've dragged our community into the national spotlight. You've embarrassed this county." Camille inhaled slowly, letting the silence that followed fill the room. Then she asked in a calm, measured tone, "Embarrassed us or exposed us?" Langford blinked. The shift caught her off guard. "Because those are two very different things," Camille continued. "Embarrassment comes from lies being told. Exposure comes from truth being revealed." A murmur ran through the restaurant. "And what happened here tonight wasn't a lie. It was a pattern," Camille said. "A pattern people have been reporting for months. A pattern you refused to acknowledge even when residents called your office asking for help." Langford stiffened. "You have no proof of that." Camille's tone remained cool. "I have voice messages," she said. "Emails, written complaints, reports you dismissed. People you ignored, entire families who reached out because they were desperate for protection from discrimination, and you buried their stories." Gasps erupted across the room. The manager sank against the wall, face ashen. The officers exchanged glances. Evelyn pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. Langford stepped back, eyes flashing. "You're bluffing," she snapped. Marcus reached into his coat, withdrawing a folder thick with printed documents. "Want to bet?" he said. Langford paled. But Camille wasn't done. "Councilwoman," she said, "you came into this restaurant with a camera, hoping to catch me scrambling. You came to accuse me of stirring chaos." She took one slow step forward. "But you didn't come here to ask why the chaos exists in the first place." A hum of agreement rose from the crowd outside, filtering through the glass. "You didn't come here to ask why so many residents, especially black residents, are afraid of places like this," Camille added. "You didn't come here to ask why calling the police on a quiet black woman eating dinner leads to humiliation and fear." Langford's jaw tightened. Camille's voice dropped, steady as stone. "You didn't come here for justice. You came here for optics." The words landed like a hammer. For the first time, Langford seemed unsure. Camille turned, addressing the entire restaurant. "Everyone saw what happened here tonight," she said. "And this," she gestured around them, "this isn't about me. This isn't even about this restaurant alone. This is about a deeper sickness in our community. One that doesn't heal by ignoring it." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. Camille faced the manager next. "You threatened me," she said quietly. "But you've threatened others too. People without titles, people without badges, people who deserved better." The manager swallowed hard. "I didn't mean." "No," Camille said. "You didn't have to mean it. You just did it." A hush fell over the room. She stepped back, addressing everyone. "The video outside, that wasn't mine. I didn't ask for it. But it exists. And people are watching. People who have their own stories. People who have lived this humiliation in silence." She let the words settle. And now they know they are not alone. The restaurant seemed to exhale all at once. The fear, the guilt, the recognition of years of unspoken truths. Marcus leaned in close. "Camille, reporters are here." She nodded. "Good." Without waiting another second, Camille walked toward the front doors. The crowd outside parted the instant she stepped through, cameras raised, microphones extended, voices shouting for statements. But Camille lifted her hand, signaling for quiet. A wave of silence rolled over the crowd. And then, for the first time that night, Camille spoke not just to a room, but to a community. To every person watching, she said, voice resonating with something powerful and unshakable. Tonight wasn't staged. It wasn't planned. It wasn't political. It was a lived experience, one many of us know too well. The crowd leaned in. "Bias isn't always loud," Camille continued. "Sometimes it's quiet, subtle, dismissive. But no matter how it shows up, it wounds." Phones recorded. Reporters scribbled. Even police officers lowered their heads. "And tonight," she said, "this county saw it. Not hidden, not whispered, but visible. A heartbeat passed. And now we must decide who we are. Do we protect the comfortable lie, or confront the uncomfortable truth?" The crowd erupted into applause, cheers, shouts of support. But Camille wasn't finished. "As of this moment," she announced, "a full civil rights investigation is being opened into Dale River Bistro and any associated businesses with prior complaints. Effective immediately, temporary closure orders are being issued pending review." The manager, hearing this from behind the window, collapsed into a chair. "And for every resident who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unsafe," Camille said, "my office is opening a task force dedicated to addressing racial bias across the county. Your stories matter. And they will be heard." The crowd cheered louder. Evelyn stepped outside, tears rolling freely down her cheeks, pride swelling in her frail chest. "Justice," she whispered. "Finally." But the true shock came next. As Camille turned to leave, one of the teenage boys, the one who had filmed the incident, pushed his way through the crowd. He stood in front of her, hands trembling. "I'm sorry," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I didn't understand. But I do now. And I'll never stay silent again." Camille placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Then tonight wasn't wasted," she said. A single tear slipped down his cheek. And with that, the storm began to settle. Justice, served in real time. Truth, undeniable. Change, set into motion. And for the first time that night, Camille let herself breathe. If any part of this hit home, don't just click away. Hit like, speak your truth in the comments, and subscribe to more real stories. The kind that challenge, confront, and connect us, can rise to the surface. Your interaction isn't just support for this channel. It's a signal that these conversations deserve space.